Good morning. Welcome to the Deep 404. Today I'm going to give a little bit of an update on the battlefront in Ukraine. Now, today is an unusual day in the amount of video footage of Ukrainian casualties, both in men and equipment, that is circulating on social media today. Now, both Twitter, but particularly Telegram, there just seems to be an influx today of endless videos of Ukrainian losses across many areas of the front, from the Kherson region, and then through to the Kupyansk region, but particularly around Rabotino in the southern Donetsk area. I've done a tally up of this is from the Ministry of Defence and their reporting. Now, in their reporting, they report their estimation of the Ukrainian losses. These losses, I believe, include killed and wounded, but they are speaking about men who are no longer able to continue to fight and either need to be evacuated to medical assistance or have died in the fighting. The number today is around the 1,000 mark. Now, there have been days in the past where this number has been claimed, 1,000 Ukrainian casualties in a day. But today, as I say, it seems to be backed up by a lot of video evidence. I'm just going to talk through some of the events of the last 24 hours here, starting in Chernihiv. Now, Chernihiv is in the north of Ukraine. It is slightly northeast of Kiev. Getting up near the Belarusian border, there was a missile strike there on a theatre, on a Ukrainian theatre, with reports of 60 people having been killed. And there's video footage showing this strike from security cameras in the area. Clearly, again, whenever there is a strike on a civilian location like this, a theatre, we get two very different sides of the story. The Western side of the story is that this is just a wanton attack by the brutal Russian regime just to instill terror and fear in the general population. Which we hear whenever there is a strike on an area like a hotel or a restaurant, where we've had in the past ones where where American and foreign mercenaries have claimed to be. Then the Russian side of the story, and now again, there is evidence rising in social media channels to back this up, that this strike was conducted on this theatre because what was being held in the theatre was a drone expo. There are translated images of flyers that had apparently been circulated, some people providing information about the expo, indicating that it would be attended by military and manufacturing representatives, people who had an interest in drone manufacture. Should attend. There was some reporting that there was some warnings that people should not attend in any military uniform, so as to not give away that this is perhaps a military event. Also, some other alleged corroborating evidence that this was an attack involving military personnel is reports of NATO air ambulances working around the clock in the area to extract perhaps NATO or military personnel from who have been wounded in the strike. Some talk that perhaps even some cryptographers may have been involved in this. Now, I can't corroborate that, but that is what's being reported at this stage in social media channels in Chernihiv. Now, in Kupyansk, in the northern direction of the front line, where there has been strong Russian pushes around the town of Kupyansk, the capture of the town of Sinkovka just to the east of Kupyansk, and long and continued advances to the west from Sinkovka. About 18 kilometres down that line, there was a push which seems to be continuing, moving forward, maybe up to 1 or 2 kilometres along that 20-kilometre front, moving closer to the Oskol River and moving to put pressure on and be able to either advance on Kupyansk itself, or then once they reach the Oskol River and breach the Oskol River, be able to begin sort of an encirclement of Kupyansk. The reporting from the Russian Ministry of Defense is that there were a number of Ukrainian offensive attacks and assaults made, and that these have all been repelled today. 130 Ukrainian troops are reported to have been lost. Now, the Ministry of Defense of Russia, some months ago, provided information on how they calculate these numbers. And apparently it is done by intercepts of Ukrainian communications. So rather than just making estimates via bodies on the ground, and people being retrieved and evacuated, instead this is based upon alleged intercept communications, and that's how they are able to determine these numbers. Now, again, difficult for me to say whether that is true or not. However, a large part of warfare is attempting to intercept your enemy's communications. And if the Russians have been able to do this and are able to listen in on the Ukrainian communications, then these numbers may well be accurate. So just in the Kupyansk line, 130 Ukrainian troops lost, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 3 motor vehicles. So these motor vehicles would be not armoured equipment. These would be supply vehicles, trucks, perhaps perhaps even commandeered civilian vehicles just used as needed. 2 US-made M109 Paladin self-propelled artillery systems have also been eliminated during the day. Moving further south to the bottom of that northern line to the Krasny Liman direction, this is where the Center Group of Forces operate. They have been using the TOS-1 heavy flamethrower systems and have repelled an attack by the 42nd Mechanised Brigade south of Kuzmino. In this direction, reports are the enemy has lost over 40 Ukrainian troops, 2 armoured fighting vehicles and 1 D-20 howitzer. Then in the Donetsk region, where the Yug Group of Forces operate and provide reports, they have repelled enemy attacks close to Andreevka, Veseloy, Krasnogorovka, Novosyolovskoye over the past 24 hours. In addition, the fighting has been very heavy here, but in addition, ammunition depots of the 24th Mechanised and 79th Air Assault Brigade are reportedly to have been hit near Donetsk and Novosyolovskoye in the Donetsk People's Republic. Now here, the numbers in this area reported are very high. This is the enemy losses amounted to up to 400 Ukrainian troops killed and wounded. Now, this is interesting. They've said killed and wounded here. There have been questions in the past as to these numbers reported if they are killed only or killed and wounded. I think now we can safely assume that these numbers are the total killed and wounded. 400 in the area of Donetsk in one day. Now, these are Russian numbers, so you choose to interpret these with the amount of skepticism that you feel is appropriate. However, as I say today, just in terms of photographic footage being reported as having happened in the last day, there is a surplus of it available today, it seems. Now, in Donetsk region here, the losses are 400 Ukrainian troops killed and wounded, 14 armoured fighting vehicles, 2 motor vehicles, and 1 D-20 howitzer. In South Donetsk, so here it's the Vostok Group of Forces that operate and are reporting. They are talking, and this is the second day that we've had these reports now, of being under sabotage and reconnaissance probing attacks from the Ukrainians close to Staromayorsk and Pryutny. Pryutny is to the west of Staromayorsk and Urochishche in the South Donetsk region. This is where the Ukrainians have been making a very costly but an advance, but they were burrowing themselves into a tube and they've needed to push out. And so it seems they've been probing to the east and the west to try to determine where the Russian forces are there. I'm trying to flatten out that tube that they've dug to make it more successful, the chances for them to be able to push down further. Reports here were that single vehicle assaults were being made, and as soon as those vehicles encountered Russian fire, they would then rapidly retreat. But they had served the purpose of revealing where the Russian positions were, so that the Ukrainians can then build a larger force to go and attack and push back that Russian position. The enemy losses reported here amount to 200 Ukrainian troops. Now, the day before that, the numbers of losses in this area was 195. So in 2 days in the South Donetsk area, we've had 395 or 400. What's interesting here, 200 Ukrainian troops killed and wounded, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 3 motor vehicles, an M-Star-B and D-30 howitzers. Now, what's interesting here is that there's 200 reported troops, soldiers lost, but only 2 armoured fighting vehicles. So this does seem to corroborate the Russian reporting that they are seeing probing attacks, infantry attacks, unprotected infantry attacks, not large columns of equipment moving men in. Here there's only 2 armoured fighting vehicles reported lost, but 200 troops. So this may be a tactic to where the area here is mined. So this area has got minefields around it. There is also Russian fire control of the approach roads into Urochishche and Staromayorsk. So as the Ukrainians attempt to move in and resupply and solidify, strengthen their positions in those townships, they come under heavy Russian artillery fire. Now that artillery fire is quite possibly returning in kind cluster munitions, which works well on infantry moving through the open. So it does seem as though the Ukrainians are resorting to these heavy infantry-laden attacks, which are very costly because these men are advancing without protection, without armoured protection from even machine gun fire. As we move down through this report today into the area in Kherson, down there in Kazachi Laheri, some of the video emerging today, they talk of a single machine gunner having caused the fatalities that are being spoken about and shown in the video. And there are a large number of dead Ukrainians in this area. And yeah, again, they're talking here that these are meat assaults. They refer to them as a terrible term, but meat assaults, unprotected by armor, just infantry making these attacks. In Zaporozhia region, so moving to the west, Russian forces, aviation, artillery repelled attacks launched by units of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade close to Rabotne in Zaporozhia. Now, the losses there are very heavy, reported up to 190 Ukrainian troops, 1 armoured fighting vehicle and 2 motor vehicles, 2 Polish-made Krab self-propelled artillery systems, as well as 1 US-made M119 howitzer. So similar to in the southern Donetsk region, here we have nearly 200 Ukrainian troops reported as being lost today and only 1 armoured fighting vehicle. So for whatever reason, again, Rorotny, we know there are minefields around there. Perhaps the Ukrainians are not trying to use armoured vehicles to get through the minefields, are instead directing their men to advance through the minefields on foot. Here, if these minefields are densely mined with anti-tank mines, they're large enough that they can be seen and they can be avoided, at least in the daytime, more difficult at nighttime. However, I have seen video of some mining techniques where Russians were mining a roadway out of the back of a supply truck. 2 men at the back of the truck just tossing out these anti-tank mines and then also tossing out smaller anti-personnel ones. Now, these must have some setting where they won't delayed an initial shock, or they require, or they have some timing fuse on them, or they're controlled remotely. But what that showed to me was that not only were there anti-tank mines in the area, but also anti-personnel mines. However, if these are just primarily anti-tank mined, these fields, then perhaps these men can manoeuvre through them, and that's why they've been sent out without their armoured support. However, these numbers are they're unsustainable. 1,000 men a day. 1,000 men a day is an unsustainable number. If you continue that for that's 7,000 dead, or not dead, 7,000 lost a week, 30,000 lost a month, 360,000 lost in a year. These numbers are dreadful. In the Kherson region, here reporting is of yesterday's fighting of only 15 Ukrainian servicemen lost. Now, this is because the Ukrainians have not established a strong foothold in this area. From the Antonovsky Bridge up to the Kazari, Laheri, or the Cossack camps area, there was 2 days ago reports of Russian forces pushing the Ukrainians that had landed there out. There are reports of continued attempted landings, small numbers in speedboats. While there are allegedly 1,000 to 1,500 Ukrainian troops amassing on the other side of the Dnieper River in the area just north of Kazarchi Laheri, they as of yet do not appear to have created an assault to get back across the river. Also furthering to the Ukrainian woes today, reports of an ammunition depot being destroyed close to Goloskov. This is in the Khmelnytsky region. Now, the Khmelnytsky region is in the center of Ukraine, the central west of Ukraine, a long way from the front line. So I would suggest this is probably drone or more likely missile strike, depleting further the Ukrainians' ammunition and ability to fight. In parallel with this, there is a video of a televised interview between the Ukrainian Air Force commander Mykola Oleshchuk. He states in here the difficulties they are having, saying that Ukrainian aircraft, once they launch and rapidly after launching, may be attacked by up to 9 Russian aircraft. Now, this seems like a large number, but this is what he's saying in a televised interview. He also then claims the air power mismatch between the Russian Su-35s, who are a 4.5 generation, beyond 4th generation fighter, perhaps not what's quite a 5th generation fighter, versus the Ukrainian MiG-29s, which are a 4th gen fighter, and that their strike capabilities are far outmatched. Now, the Su-35s have advanced manoeuvring capabilities as well and upgraded avionics, but he's talking about a range difference of between 200 kilometres for the Russian Su-35 and 25 to 30 kilometres range for the MiG-29s. So if he is correct here, you can understand why we have seen so much reporting in the last 2 months since the offensive has started of Ukrainian aircraft losses and so little Russian aircraft losses. With the Russian aircraft losses, the numbers I would say would be below 10 in the last 2 months, and they have primarily been Ka-52 attack helicopters who are active, very active on the front lines and susceptible to anti-aircraft missile attacks. However, we've had 30 or more reports of jets, Ukrainian aircraft being shot down in the last 2 months. So their numbers are dwindling rapidly. Also strikes on bases where Su-24s, which can fire storm shadows, being reported, with some of those reporting damage to the Su-24s as well. Okay, so that's a bit of a roundup for today. Really not good news for the Ukrainians in terms of the Ministry of Defence reporting and what I'm seeing on the Telegram and Twitter channels today. Finally, just a note on Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. He has travelled to Sweden. He has left Ukraine and travelled to Sweden with his wife. he has announced that the Swedish combat vehicle, the CV-90, will be produced in Ukraine, that a factory will be developed in Ukraine and production of that will begin there. Now, this seems like a strange thing to announce. You're a country losing a war. You're going to announce we're going to be building a factory, and that factory is going to produce combat fighting vehicles. This seems to me like a great telegraph to Russia to say, hey, if your satellites see us building a factory anywhere, as soon as it gets looking like it might be ready to produce something, strike it, because it could be the one we're going to develop these CV-90s in. So again, a strange tactic used by Zelensky here to indicate that they will be developing a factory on their land during this conflict. He's also been asking the Swedish for supply and access of their Gripen aircraft, the Gripen fighter. This is a very good fighter. And Zelensky is announcing that Gripen Ukrainian pilots are training on the Gripen fighter already. Now, I don't know, maybe that is true. Maybe this is the late announcement of what's going to come. However, I imagine that there will be delays with the Gripen fighter being provided to Ukraine. The Americans are delaying the F-16s. I don't know if we will see F-16s in this conflict. It is not something that the Americans want to see, is images and news of F-16s being shot down. Yet, as if the Ukrainian air commander is correct, every time they launch a plane, they're swamped by up to 9 Russian fighters. Their range isn't in comparison to the Su-35s. The F-16s will likely suffer a similar fate. And I believe the Swedes will be thinking the same thing, that they don't want the Swedish news to be plastered with pictures of burning Gripens that they've provided to Ukraine in an air battle that they can't win. Okay, thank you very much. If you've watched this far, I hope you're enjoying the channel. I really appreciate you people watching. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.